The Honourable Member for Towick-Mactaquac.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's an honour to rise once again in the People's House and to share on a very important subject that is near and dear to my heart, and that this dispute has been ongoing for now over 8 years without resolution. And quite frankly, obviously for all the rhetoric of it being a top priority of the government, that this needs to get resolved, and we're making this our most important priority, and we're seized with the issue. We are now 8 years out and still no solution. And workers across this country in the forestry sector are wondering at what point it will get resolved, and they wonder what the future is for their livelihoods and for their families. In the region that I represent, in western New Brunswick, we have several forestry-related jobs, mills and factories. In fact, it's quite personal to me in that my father worked in a pulp and paper mill for over 50 years of his life, and he carried a bucket to work every day with his lunch, the old lunch pail, the metal one, the aluminum one. And in fact, I have it in my office on my shelf as a reminder that I'm here because of people like my dad that carry those buckets every day, work hard in the forestry sector, keep our mills going, and keep the lumber moving, and keep products going overseas to help nations over there, but also provide good employment for people back here at home. And I'll never forget the time in the early 2000s when the mill went down. And my dad at that point had worked over 30 years in the pulp industry. What does a man do after working in that one sector for 30 years, who then all of a sudden loses his employment plus his pensions and everything he paid into, and overnight it disappeared quickly? It was devastating for that community where several hundred and several thousand indirect jobs were affected. The community was reeling, and thankfully, through some direct intervention and people getting very active and another company coming in and taking over, a year later the mill was up and going again, and my dad was able to get back to work. And he worked several more years there, obviously another 20 years, and was able to get back on his feet. And throughout those years was able to make a good living for our family. But whether it's a pulp mill in Nakawick, or whether it's a softwood lumber mill in Florenceville, Bristol, or the one in Plaster Rock, there are literally hundreds and thousands of people in western New Brunswick whose livelihoods depend upon the healthy forestry sector. Those are good paying jobs and hardworking individuals, men and women who work in those factories and work in those mills to provide for their families. And we can no longer just be talking about getting to a solution, getting to the table, perhaps someday seeing a solution come to this issue. We need a proactive government that will prioritize it, and it can be done. We know what happened under the previous government. When Prime Minister Harper was in place, they got to a resolution within 79 days. If it could be done then, it can be done now, but we need a government that's going to be at the table aggressively fighting for the Canadian worker, because the health and vitality of our rural communities depends upon, in part, a healthy forestry sector, including the softwood lumber trade. Right now, tragically, we've seen in these last 8 years over 183 forestry-related and logging-related companies go bankrupt. How many thousands of jobs does that represent? Not only in the West Coast or in the East Coast, but across the country. The time for prioritizing our forestry sector and getting to solutions around this issue as it relates to softwood lumber dispute is now. And how does that happen? Through direct engagement, through making it a priority and being relentless in our pursuit. Don't say it's a priority, prove it's a priority. Get to the table, be forceful, make sure something happens. I know that our American friends are very much aware that their housing costs are increasing. And in part, their housing costs are increasing for a reason. It's about supply and demand. Canada can help supply much needed, more additional lumber for the construction of houses down there that would help with their housing prices. There is a case to be made economically for more Canadian lumber to be getting into the U.S. We can make that case. And I know in my conversations with some U.S. counterparts on a personal level, because I'm a border riding, they have an appetite and a willingness to talk about that, and they recognize the challenge, and they know how Canada can help meet their resource needs. That country has resource needs. They're a big and a growing country. Canada is their most valued trading partner, and we are the closest in proximity, and we can be the supplier of these things. So let's get to the table and get this resolved as quickly as possible. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Courtenay Albany.
Madam Speaker, we know that the Conservatives are saying that the Liberals have not made the softwood lumber agreement a priority, but I can tell you the Conservatives have made partisan politics a priority. And I want to talk about solutions, Madam Speaker. This is a quote from a letter I sent to the Minister calling for the federal government to support the biomass proposal that they did put in the fall economic statement. But I cited that with 1/5 of Canada's clean energy businesses being Indigenous owned, biomass investments reassert Canada's commitment to their 94 calls to action and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Indigenous-owned biomass facilities such as the Natural Resource Canada-supported White Sand Bioeconomy Centre can create hundreds of jobs for local Indigenous communities while simultaneously meeting local energy needs. And I want to talk about, my question through you, Madam Speaker, is hopefully we can actually get back to solutions. And I want to know if my colleague supports expanding the Indigenous National Partnerships Program and funding for companies like ISCOM, the new consortium on the west coast of British Columbia. And does he believe that we should be prioritizing investing in Indigenous-owned businesses and working towards solutions that are outside the box instead of the 42 years of pointing fingers? Because we need to do, obviously, our due diligence on international trade, but we also need to change what we're doing here at home.
The Honourable Member for Tobique-Mactaquac.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thanks to my honourable colleague from the West Coast. I must say that we share a passion for getting to solutions on this issue. And engaging with our Indigenous friends and our Indigenous partners on this is critical. It is a huge piece to the puzzle, but it must go beyond not just one particular group of individuals or Canadians, but it must take on all those who are affected by this across sectors and include what the stakeholders are saying, the mill owners are saying, those who work in the sector, because many times the debates in this House, we make decisions and we talk about things in esoteric terms, and we lose sight of the workers whose lives are most impacted by the decisions we make, whether it's in natural resources or in fisheries or in any of the energy sector. Oftentimes decisions get made without true consultation and considering the lives and the livelihoods that are going to be most impacted by these decisions. So, Madam Speaker, I would encourage that all of us make sure that we're meaningfully at the table to make sure that this situation gets resolved sooner rather than later. It must be a priority.
The Honourable Member for Courtenay-Columbia.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And my question to the member, thank you so much for your speech. And also, I recognize that you just got into town. It's been busy, a hectic day for you. My question is, it's been 8 years, and I know myself personally, last 4, I've been asking for updates because it's so important for people, Courtenay-Columbia, all the workers I have, forest industries, one of the biggest that one of my biggest industries. Do you think that what the time we're waiting now is excessive, like especially in the last 8 years? Also, can you say, how would you go to the people who are in this industry and say, oh, it's just going to take a few more years?
Just a reminder that the Honourable Member should speak through me. I can't answer the questions. The Honourable Member for Tobique-Mactaquac.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thanks to my honourable colleague from Courtenay-Columbia and tremendous work he does on behalf of those in the forest industry and standing up for those who work in that sector, like do in my region of the country, over in Eastern Canada and Atlantic Canada as well, and in Western New Brunswick. What is going to be so needed is that this becomes a priority instead of just another talking point. Oh yes, we're working, or we're thinking about it, or we're going to negotiate. These things take time. No, we need urgency, and this needs to become a priority. The government can make what it wants to be a priority, and the workers from coast to coast need to become a priority for this government sooner rather than later.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, as you know, the lumber industry supports thousands of jobs in communities across the country. But I'd really like to ask through you, Madam Speaker, to the member opposite of, we're working collectively to make sure that we're protecting our softwood lumber industry, but I'd like to know why the Conservative, including that member opposite, voted against funding to support the softwood lumber industry that our government put forward.
The Honourable Member for Tobique-Mactaquac.
Once again, they love to play this game, but the role of the official opposition is to hold the government to account and to make sure they come up with better answers for Canadians' problems and solutions to the challenges that Canadians are facing. And that vote wasn't a vote on a particular line item within a big, huge budget or a spending bill. No, that was a vote of non-confidence in a government that needs to be replaced sooner rather than later.
Resuming debate for 20 seconds. If anyone wants to speak for 20 seconds, the honourable member for North Okanagan, Shuswap.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In 20 seconds, I can say it very succinctly. It was promised within 100 days. We are now at 8 years, 97 months, 2,929 days. They have not got it done. It's time to get it done. Thank you.